We are more stressed and anxious now than we were before the pandemic. And if you layer on top of that the fact that 1 in 3 adults is chronically sleep deprived, of course we're exhausted. This isn't just about a busy week or a demanding job. This is a cultural level of pressure that many of us are living every single day, which means a huge portion of us are just walking around slightly fried. Not broken, not failing, just fried. And if you live slightly fried long enough, it starts to feel normal. Welcome to Badass Softy, a podcast for leaders who are unapologetically ambitious and want to lead with heart because you're allowed to chase big goals without losing what makes you human. I'm your host, Dr. JJ Peterson, and I just have to ask, is anybody else tired right now? Just me? No, it's just me. I find myself in a season of constantly being on the go, both in my professional and personal life, especially right now. I mean, I just finished teaching my classes at Vanderbilt, which were amazing, but exhausting when you have to grade for 80 students. You know, I hosted multiple friends from out of town. I just yesterday had a marketing strategy workshop with a company where we created 3 different brand scripts for multiple products. I'm about to head to New York and pretty much have a suitcase ready for when I come home because a few hours later I have to head to Oregon. All of this is happening while still trying to get the kids ready for school in the morning to have a decent breakfast, blah, 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 right? And it feels like this has all been going on since the start of the new year. And I have a few more trips like that before I even have time at home where I finally get to catch up with my friends and go on a date with my kids and my husband and take time to recover. And I don't seem to be able to slow down right now. In fact, if I use the sentence, if I could just get through blank, everything will be okay. If I use that sentence one more time, I think my husband is going to slap me. I keep saying things like that over and over. And if I'm honest, this is not new for me. I like to pretend like this is just happening right now. It's just this season that I'm in. But really, this is a pattern that I've developed over years of constantly being on the go. And, you know, sometimes it's commitments that I've made for work, and sometimes it's just because I want to do all the fun things. But it's always my choice, and I get to say yes, and I get to say no. But the real problem is not whether it's my choice or not, but being on the go constantly is just not sustainable, especially now that I have a family. I mean, nobody can keep up with that kind of lifestyle of always going for very long. It begins to weigh on you relationally, physically, and even spiritually. And it turns out this isn't just me, that I'm not just the one with a problem. The American Psychological Association has been tracking stress levels for years. And recently, they've discovered that a majority of adults say stress is currently, right now, impacting their physical health. And many say they feel overwhelmed at least part of the time. Now, here's a fun thing, is parents report even higher stress levels than non-parents. Can I get an amen? Gallup reports that around 4 in 10 Americans say they felt a lot of stress just the previous day. Not last year, yesterday. Everybody is feeling stressed just even yesterday. And in the recent years, stress in the U.S. has actually spiked and remains elevated compared to historical averages. The CDC has reported rising levels of anxiety and depression symptoms among adults since 2020. Those numbers haven't fully settled back down. We are more stressed and anxious now than we were before the pandemic. And if you layer on top of that the fact that 1 in 3 adults is chronically sleep deprived, of course we're exhausted. This isn't just about a busy week or a demanding job. This is a cultural level of pressure that many of us are living every single day, which means a huge portion of us are just walking around slightly fried. Not broken, not failing, just fried. And if you live slightly fried long enough, it starts to feel normal. And part of the problem is even now, we never really power down. I mean, technology has blurred the boundaries between work and home, relationships and rest. We are reachable all the time, which means our nervous systems are rarely fully off. Chronic stress does something to the body because elevated cortisol over time affects sleep, immune responses, even emotional regulation. Which means when I say it weighs on you and when the going weighs on us relationally, physically, and spiritually, that's not poetic language. It's biology. It's reality. Research shows that Americans check their phones dozens to hundreds of times per day on average. And that constant interruption increases cognitive fatigue and stress hormone levels. We rarely these days experience true psychological detachment anymore. And here's what I find fascinating as I begin to dig into this a little bit more, is that research shows that even passive rest isn't enough to recover from all of this. Sitting on the couch and zoning out, even if your phone is off, doesn't actually restore you. What actually lowers stress markers is psychological detachment and intentional reflection. Let me say that again. What actually helps in recovery and lower your stress markers is psychological detachment and intentional reflection. Closing loops in your brain and interpreting the experiences that you are having. Years ago, my friend Scott Congdon taught me that in order to stay healthy, we need to create what he would call points of demarcation in our lives. These are just real or even symbolic moments that mark an end of one season and the beginning of another. So Scott was president of Amor, which is an NGO that's doing community development in some of the poorest areas in the world. I'm actually on the board for Amor. And every year, starting in January, the team prepares for thousands of teens and adults to come to Mexico over the 6 weeks of spring break. So they're already preparing for all of that. And then once spring arrives, it's a sprint till the end of April, living in tents, building hundreds of homes, schools, clinics, churches. And then by the end of that April, after all the kids have gone home, then they have about 1 month to kind of rush and prepare for all the teams that are coming down for the summer. Hundreds and hundreds of more teens. Then after that, there is 14 weeks where they're actually building homes, working in the sun in Mexico, building homes all summer. It is nonstop from January to the end of summer. And it's real easy during that time to not take a break for 9 months because, after all, the work that is happening is incredibly important. Lives are literally being changed on both sides of the borders. Families finally are getting a roof over the head before winter comes. Communities can find pride in a new school or a clinic or a church. I mean, it is life-saving, life-changing work. But even in the midst of the chaos and the drive to get things done, Scott always takes time off between spring and summer. He said that he found out that if he didn't, he burned out and was ineffective. So he would actually take 3 or 4 days and head off on a retreat to rest, recover, and here's the important piece, reflect. He would ask a few questions, but the main one was, what did I learn? He would take time to celebrate his successes and mourn his mistakes and figure out what he learned from both and be able to close the chapter on a season and move to the next. In the Hebrew Psalms, you will occasionally see the word Selah. Its meaning has been debated over the years, but most scholars believe that its intent is to offer the musical director a hint of how the song is supposed to go. The word is derived from the Hebrew root word that means to hang or to weigh. So the Selah is really a pause, most likely a musical interlude in the middle of the song that's used to reflect on the words that have just been spoken. The Selah is there to tell the singer to measure or weigh carefully the meaning of what has been said. In other words, Here is wisdom, pause, reflect, and understand. It's often at the end of a phrase or a verse, but it's still in the middle of the song. There is an intentional pause in the middle of the song to weigh the wisdom. Psychologists talk about something called cognitive fatigue. When we're constantly moving from task to task without pause, our working memory actually gets taxed. And when that happens, our ability to make good decisions declines. Our emotional regulation decreases. Our creativity drops. But research shows that even brief intentional pauses can restore cognitive performance and reduce mental fatigue. And reflection does something slightly different than rest alone. Rest helps the body recover. Reflection helps the mind recover. Without interpretation, our mind just continues to go on loops and we begin to repeat patterns unconsciously. When we reflect, we gain agency. We gain control. We gain real rest. And I've found over the years that finding space for moments of demarcation or Selah is vital to my sanity and health. When I was dean of students and professor at a university, I would take a week at the end of every school year to reflect on what had transpired the past year. What did I learn, both good and bad? What could I celebrate? What did I need to mourn that I felt like didn't go the way I wanted? Yes, I could have been preparing for the fall kickoff and all the students who were going to be coming and get ahead of the game, or, get ready for all the activities and camps that were going to be on campus for the summer. But I needed space to plant a flag in the ground and say, this season is done before I could move on to the next. I needed to hang in the moment and weigh what I had learned from my successes and my failures, and then not remain stuck in the loop of either. It felt so much easier for me to do this when I was on a school calendar because there were clear breaks where one year ended and another began. But the further that I got away from that, the harder really is to keep up with the rhythm of Selah. And I'll be honest, I used to be really good at this. But after getting married, becoming a dad, starting my own business, it's been harder and harder for me to keep up that intentionality of the rhythm. And the truth is, I continue to need to do this to this day. I need to make time for a break because it changes everything. And what I've learned is it's not about the setting, it's about the intention. Because sometimes when I would take these reflective moments, they would be for a day, sometimes they'd be for a week or just a morning. Sometimes I would spend it at a monastery in solitude and silence, and then sometimes, honestly, I spent it in Vegas, eating good food, sitting by a pool. Sometimes it could have just been journaling at a coffee shop or a local park. But the wisdom that I found in that reflection could come both in the time away, which I called fasting, or the time being present with a lot of things, which I called feasting. Wisdom could be found in the feasting or the fasting. It didn't matter about the location. What mattered is the intentionality of the reflection. How it happens and where it happens, or even how long it happens, those are not the point. It's not just about pause and rest, which is necessary because our bodies need to recover. But it is about stepping into the wisdom that comes from reflection. If you never take time to reflect on where you have been and what you want to go to next, you don't ever give your brain a break. We need to remember that it is like the Selah in Psalms. These breaks come in the middle of the songs, in the middle of life. They are not removing yourself from it. The break should not be seen as a separate journey, a distinct or disconnected moment of rest from life. It is a pause in the middle of life that allows you to reflect on the experience you've just had, gain wisdom, and understand the life that you've been given. When I can get out of the noise and bustle of my career to sit softly and learn and reflect on what has happened, why things happen, and what needs to happen next, It's not always easy, but I have to choose to make the time. Whatever season you find yourself in, make sure to take time to eventually end that season. Have a moment of demarcation. Even if there's not a good time to pause, make time. Whether you classify that season as good or bad, mark it with an ending. And when you do that, take time to pause and weigh what has happened and what will happen next. You have to make it happen because it doesn't happen on accident. And if you're listening to this and thinking, well, that sounds nice, but I don't have time for a retreat. I'm not going to a monastery. I'm not going to Vegas. Let me make this really simple. Schedule 90 minutes. 90 minutes feels like a lot when you're putting it on the calendar, but you have the time. Put it on your calendar. And then go somewhere slightly different than your normal environment. Bring a notebook. And I want you to ask yourself a few questions. What did this season teach me? What do I need to celebrate? What do I need to grieve or release? And what needs to change before the next season begins? And then write down 1 or 2 sentences that mark the end of this chapter. Plant a flag. You do not need a monastery. You do not need a faraway place. You just need intention. I'm going to be moving at breakneck speed for much of this year. Our calendar, when I looked at our calendar, it's already booked. We have so many fun and cool things happening both in work and in our family. But it is so important that in the midst, I find time not just for my family, but for myself, where I can sit by the ocean and listen to the waves, see a Broadway show after a walk in Central Park, spend a morning at a coffee shop journaling or just getting lost in an antique store, walking down the rows, holding items that remind me of my youth or help me dream about new homes in my future. Just enjoy a day in the sun. I could have a nice dinner with steak and a bottle of wine and cheers to the end of a season before preparing for the next. No matter what I'm doing, I commit to pausing. I commit to leaning into the wisdom of the previous season. I won't rush past the lessons. I will pause long enough to explore beauty and prepare for what is to come. Selah. So let me leave you with this. May you find the courage to pause in the middle of your song. May you weigh what has been given to you. May your rest turn into wisdom, your reflection sharpen your leadership, and may you enter your next season on purpose, not just with momentum, but with Selah. Because we believe you can be both ambitious and kind, fun and driven, powerful and deeply human. Your leadership can inspire, your success can have soul, and your ambition can make space for everyone. That's why you're a badass softie. We'll see you next week. Thanks for listening. Follow and subscribe so you don't miss an episode. BadassSoftie.com is crafted by Fruitful Design and Strategy.